Welcome to the Bowden Blitz SEC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, week number 10 in the conference is shaping up to be another classic weekend of college football. We'll take a look at the updated odds entering week number 10, and make no mistake about it, Alabama sits as the top dog, plus 115 to hoist a conference championship, followed by Texas A&M, fresh off their victory in Baton Rouge, then Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas to round it out. Coach, is Alabama the team to beat in the SEC entering week number 10?
Well, that's what the odd makers say, but I really don't see a lot of distance between Alabama, Texas A&M, Georgia, and to be honest with you, for the money, for the bang for your buck, I kind of like Ole Miss. I'll tell you, just because of the way they have not played bad against any good team. They've knocked off LSU and Oklahoma back-to-back. We'll see a little bit more how good they are, but it could be, to me, Alabama's the one that's at the top of the list, but I can't see them any better than A&M or Georgia, to be honest with you. And then when you're going to pick someone that just has that special year and finds a way to play well, Ole Miss is right there.
I agree. I think for me, and Alabama, we get it. They have the brand recognition. They have the name. But again, there's, every week outside maybe the Georgia performance, they have been pushed to the limit. They were pushed by Missouri. They had an opportunity, the Tigers did, to potentially tie or win that game on a last-second drive. We saw that South Carolina had Alabama on the ropes this past Saturday in Williams-Brice. If it wasn't for Jeremy Bernard and the touchdown run, that game potentially could have went into overtime. I think the one team that, if you look from week number 1 to week number 9 right now, that's been the most consistent, I would say it's A&M. And I understand that they played some close games early on, but they were a dog against Notre Dame. They won that game outright 41-40. Since that time, they have been boat racing teams, knocked off Mississippi State in dynamic fashion. They laid 18.5 in that matchup. They dominated LSU, won by 24 points, basically as a 2.5-point favorite. I mean, the body of work by Mike Elko in year number 2 is amazing.
Yeah, I don't think you could have any problem having them as your favorite. That what they've done is shown if it's got to be a defensive battle like they had against Auburn, they'll win with defense 16-10. If they got to score points, they had that tough game with Arkansas, 45-42, same as Notre Dame. They find a way to win big. And then at this point, they're dominating now. Second half, they were losing at halftime against LSU. At LSU, they didn't panic. They played like a championship team. They came back and destroyed them, probably cost Brian Kelly his job at least a week earlier than it might have happened before. But the fact is they are playing great. But like I say, I like the talent level of all those teams. And I think you want to have a little bang for your buck and play around with a team that could slide in. Ole Miss might be that team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ole Miss does have a tough matchup against South Carolina this weekend in the Grove. They're 12.5, 13-point home favorites over Lenore Sellers. This was a game that they had dominated last year in Williams-Brice. We'll turn our attention to the Heisman odds, Coach. I said that Alabama, I still think potentially has some weaknesses. I don't think Ty Simpson has any weakness in his game entering this weekend. He deserves to be the front runner, in my opinion, 4-1 shot to potentially win a Heisman Trophy in mid-December. We see Marcel Reed and Diego Pavia. I tell you what, if Diego Pavia gets the victory in Austin this Saturday, he might be the front runner over Ty Simpson no matter what happens.
Well, what we have to remember, the Heisman Award is not about who's going to be the number 1 draft pick with the NFL talent. It's about publicity. Who has taken his team to the championship? Who has the most fabulous background story that everybody falls in love with? Diego Pavia fits into that category, as does Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss. Those would be the 2 dark horses. But if they keep winning, I don't know that Pavia will be a dark horse. But when you look at the odds favorite, I think you look at the undefeated teams and the quarterback at Indiana, they do everything right. His numbers are outstanding. He is doing a great job right there. You got to remember now, the Heisman comes the week after the conference championships, and you could see Julian Sayin as an undefeated quarterback against Fernando Mendoza as an undefeated quarterback going against each other with 2 undefeated teams in that Big Ten championship.
And I think Gunnar Stockton, too, from the SEC. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, under the radar. And the only reason why I say that, in big matchups against Tennessee, he put up numbers in the second half, and the comeback win over Ole Miss in Athens. Still has everything in front of him. It's not going to be easy, but let's
Yes.
not forget the teams that he plays. He plays the cocktail party this coming Saturday against Florida, still could face off later in the year against an undefeated Georgia Tech team. That could be a top 5 battle, coach. If he puts up numbers and knocks off or hands Georgia Tech their first loss of the year, all of a sudden Gunnar Stockton at a 16-1 number could have great value down the stretch.
I think, again, the better it gets toward the end of the season, and the SEC is going to have unbelievable games toward the end. And I think a lot of that, the quarterbacks in the SEC, and don't forget Marcel Reed and the year he's having as well. It's all going to boil down to who is everybody talking about. And I was a voter for about 10 years for the Heisman back when I was with ABC Sports. Who is getting the most publicity? Who's got everybody cranked up in that last championship game? You're talking about a lot of those SEC guys will be playing in big games around that SEC championship time.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the national championship odds right now, Coach. Alabama plus 750. Georgia, I think, still, again, has great value. I've saw 2 games now where the Georgia offense had to carry the Bulldogs to victory against Tennessee and Ole Miss, respectively. To me, that matters, especially in a playoff environment. You want to have a team that can run the football and have explosive chunk plays in the passing game. And right now, entering Week 10, Georgia would be my pick to potentially win not just an SEC championship, but a national championship this season. What about the other teams on the cusp, maybe? We saw Texas get pushed in back-to-back weeks against Kentucky and Mississippi State. If they get this victory over Vanderbilt, could they potentially make a run at a national championship the way Arch is playing? And he's questionable this weekend.
I don't know. I mean, they have not proven it. I don't think he'll play with the concussion protocol this week, and him missing a game this late in the season will be tough. And they'll have a tough time winning without him playing in that game this weekend. But I still think that Alabama's quarterback is the reason they're playing so well, is because I think he's surprised everybody, Ty Simpson, with how well he's playing. And Marcel Reed, the way he's got Texas A&M playing and it being the dual threat, he has a way of making things happen. So I love all those guys, and I think Stockton's going to be a matter of Georgia. If Georgia gets back, they've got the type of team that can go far in the playoffs and possibly pay for a championship. Like I said, the Heisman is going to be picked before we get through much of that playoff season. So it's got to be what have you done for me in the conference and at the conference championship game time.
I agree. So if we're looking body of work right now, I agree with you about Georgia. I do agree with you about Texas A&M. That front seven is as good as anybody. And when you play 21% on third down defense, heading into a playoff type of environment, that's dynamic. We talked about how dominant they were on third down, Texas A&M. Entering that game against LSU, they had held the previous 4 opponents to 6 of 43 on third downs. That's 13%. You play like that, big picture, you got yourself a national championship contender in College Station.
That's right, because you got to remember, when you get to the final 12 people in those playoffs, you're going to come up with one team's going to score a lot of points. You've got to have a great defense, but also the ability to match them on the score table, and as well as a team with a great defense. Excuse me. With a great defense, you've got to be able to score.
Absolutely. When Coach and I come back, we'll break down the top 4 battles in the SEC entering week number 10. We'll take a look at Florida and Georgia in the largest cocktail party. We'll break down, can the Dogs cover the 7.5-point number? The battle in Austin, Texas favored over Vanderbilt by 2.5 points. What gives? Coach and I will return and break those down next. Back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden taking a look at Week 10 in the conference. Biggest game is a rivalry game at 3:30. Georgia and Florida. Florida and Georgia both coming out of a bye week. We know about the interim staff taking over for Billy Napier. Last time the Gators played, they won at home against Mississippi State. 23-21. We talked about how Georgia coaches like a chameleon. They can play an upscale, up-tempo type of game and put up 40 points, or they can grind it out like they did on the road in Auburn just a couple of weeks ago, winning that matchup 20-10. They have won 4 straight in the series, Coach, by an average margin of victory of 14-plus points per game. They're only laying 7.5 in this matchup. As much as my heart wants to take Florida with the points, I think it's a bad matchup. I think with the week of preparation will benefit Georgia more than Florida. I think the Bulldogs roll in this ballgame.
Well, the thing that we don't know is, does a change of coach give the team some juice? Does it give them some kind of attitude where they, Virginia Tech got that right off the change, won a couple of games. I don't know if that has an effect on Virginia Tech. They named one of their assistants, Billy Gonzalez, the receiver coach, is the interim head coach. But they're not. It's just as likely that they'll come out flat, that they'll come out just couldn't get their heads back into the game. And Georgia is a team that knows what they've got to do to get back where they belong. Now, Georgia is not playing good old Kirby Smart defense right now. Statistically, they're not like the championship teams. They're very good. But when you look at the numbers in sacks, the numbers in tackles for loss, the third down percentage, they're not top 50 in the country in these areas that they've always top 50 in. But I think the real X factor with Georgia is Kirby Smart's ability to make adjustments, his ability to know what it's like to play in big games, to get to the championship level. I think he takes that defense, and if they don't play well early, they come back late and they come on strong. And so, again, I like Georgia. I like Georgia in the points, and I don't think Florida's going to recover. This is not you'd think in Jacksonville, Florida, it would be more of a home game for Florida, but it is not. They're close to Athens, and it's a 50-50 stadium, but it will be rocking. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Absolutely. I think to your point, the one thing I think when you look at Georgia is that they have given up a lot of explosive plays, whether it be in the run game, the game against Tennessee. Joey Aguilar is well over the top. Now, statistically, they've bounced back in terms of run support. They're holding opposing offenses to only 3.2 yards per rush, 91 rushing yards allowed per game. But, Coach, they only have 8 sacks. That averages about 1 per game. You look at last year was 37. For years, Georgia averaged right in the area of about 46 to 47 sacks per year in their heyday when they won back-to-back national championships. So to your point, if you can't get quarterback pressures, it doesn't matter who's back there. It gives the quarterback at least the ability to survey the field and to convert on third downs. I will say the one thing and bright spot about Georgia has been the rushing attack. They are running the football effectively this year. Last year, they were only in the area of about 130 rushing yards per game. This year, and entering this matchup, $190, and they put up 221 against Ole Miss. I think that's the recipe potentially for Georgia not only winning but covering this number.
That's right. It'll make sure they keep the ball out of Florida's offensive hands. And DJ Lagwell, we got to remember, he is a dual threat. I do want to say this: they're very poor at Georgia with sacks, but quite often that means your defensive linemen are staying in their lanes. They're not giving up scrambles when they don't overrush the quarterback. So that could be a blessing in disguise, making sure DJ only has the pocket and doesn't have the running lanes that he likes to have when he really hurts people.
Yeah, so let's turn our attention to the battle in Austin. It's a 12 o'clock kick. It has huge SEC implications on the line. It's another potential SEC elimination game. If Vanderbilt loses, they're potentially on the outside looking in. And even though Texas only has 1 loss in the conference, it would be their 3rd if they drop this game to the Commodores on Saturday. We talked about Arch Manning being in concussion protocol last year in Nashville as a 21-point favorite, Coach. Texas went in there and was put and pushed to the limit by Diego Pavia. They only won it by 3 points, 27-24. We saw Texas struggle in back-to-back weeks against Kentucky and Miss State going to overtime in both of those games. Something tells me this is going to be another tough ball game. I want to lay it with Texas, but I don't think it's going to be easy.
No, I'm picking Vandy right out to win this game. I just think a couple of things. Although Archie Manning had his best game of the year last week, he's hurt. He's out, and I don't believe he's going to play. I've talked to people down there. He may be, but they're going to be very cautious. He's got a pretty big name. He got a pretty good future, and that concussion protocol is very protective in their decisions. And if he does not play, I think that hurts a lot. But even if he does, I think the quarterback that's going to make the difference in the game is Diego Pavia. I think we know he's going to play. We know how they're going to play. Texas has won twice in a row. They played badly. We don't know how Texas is going to play. That's where the problem is with Texas right now, is how are they going to play? Even when they win, they don't play very well. But I know Vanderbilt is on the verge of having something they've never had in their school's history. Those players are locked in every minute of practice, every day they're locked in. They've got a quarterback that really thinks he's the best thing in the country. And in a lot of ways, especially running their offense, he is. And so I just think they're going to go down there. And I think if it's a backup Caldwell, their backup quarterback, I think it's Matthew Caldwell is their backup. He came in and threw the touchdown pass. I think that got them in the win last week. But he hasn't been. He's been at Troy. He's been at Gardner Webb. He's been at Jacksonville State. He's kind of one they picked up to back up. And so I'm going with Pavia. And again, it's a field goal, 2.5 points. I feel like that's almost a toss-up game. And I just think Vanderbilt's got something special, and I haven't ridden them long enough. I'm not getting off that pony.
You look at Vanderbilt right now, averaging 38 points per game from an offensive perspective, holding opposing offenses to only 18 points per game. They play very sound third down defense, only allowing 101 rushing yards to opposing offenses and only 3.5 yards per carry. They did get exposed a little bit by Ahmad Hardy in Missouri. They allowed $170 on the ground last week. That potentially can be a recipe to Texas winning this matchup Saturday afternoon. Total is set at 45.5. When we come back, we'll talk about the other two matchups, Oklahoma and Tennessee, South Carolina, Ole Miss coming up next. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz, taking a look at the Week 10 matchups in the SEC. Another elimination game takes place in Knoxville. These teams played last year in Norman. Tennessee did get the victory. It was a game where Oklahoma had major quarterback issues with Jackson Arnold. He was pulled at halftime in favor of Michael Hawkins. Offense couldn't sustain drives and put up points against a very good front seven in Tennessee. Different story potentially this year. We saw Oklahoma lose outright as a 5.5-point home favorite last week to Ole Miss. They lost that matchup by 8 points. Tennessee throttled Kentucky on the road in Lexington, put up 50-plus on the Wildcats en route to the win. They won it in convincing fashion as a 7.5-point road favorite. Coach, they're now laying 3.5 points to Volunteers against John Mateer and the Sooners. I know Oklahoma has not looked good since John Mateer came back from injury offensively, but in this type of matchup with the veteran quarterback and that defense, I think they bounce back with a huge effort. I think they win this game outright in Neyland Stadium.
Yeah, I'm picking Oklahoma as well. I think the thing that's really concerning if you're for Tennessee is that they give up points. Every team, every FBS team they played this year has scored 24 or more offensive points. I think one defensive score got them over 24 in one football game, but they give those up. Kentucky and Kentucky had over 400 yards of offense, and that quarterback threw 5 touchdown passes. A key to this of my thinking is that John Mateer is getting better, because that's important. Because I think Oklahoma will play well. They'll play good defense. And I think it's a great offense versus a great defense. Top 10 defense at Oklahoma, top 10 offense at Tennessee. But I think the difference is Mateer will be healthy. I believe if he's healthy, it'll be more points because for Oklahoma, because they are not playing well defensively at Tennessee. And so I've got this as an upset as far as Oklahoma beating Tennessee in Rocky Top.
Yeah, we'll see exactly how it plays out. We saw Star Thomas get more involved in the offense. Bishop, the leading rusher for the Volunteers, they can run it as good as anybody in the country. Very balanced offensive attack, and similar potentially to what Ole Miss likes to run. Tempo, mobile type of quarterback, and a quarterback that's going to challenge you over the top. And Joey Aguilar, if he did it against Georgia, you know he's going to take his shots at home against Oklahoma. How does Brett Venables and Oklahoma adjust will be very critical to potentially, if Oklahoma wins this matchup, Coach. Again, I'm willing to take a shot, which I feel is the better defense and slightly more mature quarterback in John Mateer on the road. I'll take my shot. Do feel, though, that it's an under 58.5, because I do feel that Oklahoma will be able to dictate the tempo in this matchup. The other game I want to take a look at, Ole Miss, South Carolina. Ole Miss is playing as good as anybody in the conference right now from an offensive perspective. We saw defensively they were slightly exposed by Georgia on the ground, and last week in the second half by John Mateer and that Oklahoma passing attack. But this is a tough matchup because you don't want to look ahead of South Carolina. So South Carolina has nothing to play for, just looking to get back to respectability and bowl eligibility. But they have a quarterback in Lenora Sellers that could take this game over. How do you see this one playing out in the Grove?
Well, I just see it the way Ole Miss has played offensively, even in their loss against Georgia and their victory at Oklahoma. Their offense has been consistent. The quarterback has handled every situation. So I really see Ole Miss being consistent on offense and scoring points. And I don't see South Carolina being able to hold up and score enough. Now, I don't think Ole Miss has got a dominant defense. Statistically, they aren't. But I just think I think that quarterback at Ole Miss has been through enough tough environments on the road. There's not going to be a whole lot of South Carolina's not going to be able to show up. This will be at home, but I don't think South Carolina's got enough out there to stay in there with Ole Miss as long as Ole Miss doesn't get thinking down the road and thinking ahead, because right now they've got a pretty good-looking schedule to get by South Carolina.
Ole Miss has everything in front of them. Win out, win the Egg Bowl later in the year against Mississippi State, and most likely they could be potentially in an SEC championship. At the very worst, they would be one of the top 12 teams in a college football playoff. I think when you just look at South Carolina right now, can they maintain the consistency in the passing attack? We saw Lenora Sellers and that passing attack come alive against Alabama, over 200 passing yards. If they could duplicate that type of effort, potentially they could be within the number. I think a lower scoring game favors South Carolina. This game gets into the 50s. Ole Miss should roll. For Coach Bowden, I'm Joe Lisi. Have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy the games. We'll see you next week.